Okay, it's Sunday, which means against my better judgment, it's time to go to Reddit and see what we can find in this hive of scum and villainy. So I've been to the Overwatch University subreddit ahead of time and just scraped all the questions off the first couple pages, and we're going to answer the questions now while just some random Overwatch footage plays in the background. I like to put fighters up in the background for these videos, but I just haven't played it in the last week, so we're just going to have this. We haven't watched this video yet, so here's a teaser for what we're going to do in the next couple of days. And we got another one, because I'll definitely go over time on this one. So first off, is trading Dragonblade for Trance worth it? And, I mean, the cop-out answer is it depends, but it's, for one thing, if you can do Nanoblade with Trance, Nanoblade, you counter Trance regardless, because you can actually kill someone through Trance if you're Nanobladed. Because if you cut and then dash immediately after it hits the person, that does enough damage to actually kill someone through Trance. If they're a squishy target. Obviously, it's not going to work on a tank. So, it actually, if you've got Nanoblade, you don't even have to worry about it. You can just kill them straight through Trance. But, you know, it's not unusual for the Genji player and the Zenyatta player to spend a lot of time just kind of holding their ultimates sometimes. It is worth trading Blade for Trance if you've got another ultimate that's also very threatening that is countered by Transcendence. So if there's a Zarya on your team, for example, then you using Dragonblade to trade with Trance means that now Zarya's ultimate can't be countered with Trance. And then, hey, you've still got another scary ultimate, Zen's out of the way, that'll work. Or vice versa, they might use Trance for Graviton, and then you can just use Dragonblade freely. So in that kind of situation, yeah, it's worth trading it, because it's you've traded a strong ultimate for another strong ultimate, but you've got another scary ultimate in reserve to use freely now. If you don't have another ultimate that is very scary, then I don't really think it's the end of the world if you just sit on the Trance or sit on the Dragonblade for a while until you can either force Trance out of Zenyatta early, or he gets picked off, and now you can use it. Because if you're holding Dragonblade, then Zenyatta has to hold Trance as well. So now you're hamstringing him as much as you're being hamstrung. And if they can't use their defensive ultimate freely because you'll kill them otherwise, then that means they're still vulnerable to losing the team fight. And sooner or later, Zenyatta's gonna fuck up. Like, sooner or later, he's gonna get picked off. He's gonna use it early because he got dropped really low. Something will happen sooner or later. And then you can use Dragonblade. So I don't think it's that bad if you end up holding it for a while, because you know he's got his until you can find an opportunity. But yeah, it's worth trading if you've got another scary ultimate, pretty much. So next, this isn't really a question so much as it is just I thought something interesting to think about, so we're going to have it in, and I'm curious what other people's opinion is, though I think I know what most people will say. Which hero, if removed from the roster, would make comp an overall much more enjoyable experience? And for me, it's going to be Doomfist, because Doomfist is just such an obnoxious hero to play against, and I truly don't think that they're ever going to be able to balance Doomfist in a meaningful way. I think he's always going to be extremely obnoxious or completely useless. I don't think there will ever be a middle ground for Doomfist. And when Doomfist is strong, it is one of the most oppressive experiences in the entire game. You just see him coming towards you, and if you aren't very specific heroes, you know that you're about to have a very bad time. Some heroes just can't really do anything against his ultimate other than, like, hug a corner and pray that he fucks up and you can just, like, duck around the corner to dodge it. You know, it's not fun getting one shot. When he was very fucking tanky, if he manages to start building up his shields, makes it pretty much impossible for one person to kill him. So for me, it's going to be Doomfist. I think I know what most people will say in response to that as well, but you know, I thought it was interesting to think about at least. Special mention, I think, actually goes to Reinhardt, actually, because Reinhardt has this very unfortunate effect of the game on being most of the time mandatory, not because there's another Reinhardt usually, and not very fun to play. And not really very fun to play against either, to be honest with you. The game is kind of like, I think, balanced around Reinhardt to a certain extent, or at least it was on release, no doubt, and skewed a bit away from that now that we've got more options, but I think Reinhardt overall has a very, He drags the overall pace of the game down on top of being, like, mandatory a lot of the time, and just such a fucking chore to play as and against. And if you're playing against one and you don't have one, like, you've got to be afraid constantly of getting earth-shattered. Sometimes you eat shit and there's not a lot you can do about it, like, yeah. So I think actually Reinhardt would make the game overall, by his removal, more fast-paced and more enjoyable. And, you know, so there you go. That's my vote. Next up, is it possible to be a flex player at very high SR? And it did mean very high SR, like Masters and above, pretty much. And being a flex player is one of those things that gets more difficult to do the higher you climb in SR, because you are never going to be as good as a flex player, like on an individual hero-to-hero basis, as you would be if you just focused on a set number of heroes instead. And, you know, that's not so much of a bad thing, lower SR, because you don't need to be individually, like, super skilled at any particular hero to still be, like, be able to climb, right? Like, you can be, like, really good at a couple that you like, and then just, like, average at everything else. And, like, as long as you're just, like, average as those heroes, it's not the end of the world, right? But the higher you get, the higher your individual skill with a hero needs to be to actually be considered average, pretty much. So, as you get higher and higher, like, you should, if you're a flex player, I think the higher you climb, the more you should be looking to shrink your hero pool over time. Because the higher you get, like, if you're spreading your play out across, like, 8 different heroes, then by the time you get to probably Diamond, like, you are not going to be individually good enough at most of those heroes to actually be, like, acceptable level, pretty much. So I think that, yeah, it's possible, but you need to drastically shrink the definition of flex. Because if you're in, like, gold, then I think you can feasibly flex across probably, like, pretty close to double-digit heroes and be fine, honestly. It's obviously not as good as you would be if you focused more specifically, but I think you can be, like, acceptable on, like, that many heroes for, like, that SR. But by the time you get to Diamond, I think you need to shrink it down to, like, 4 or 5, and then once you get above that, you're like, this is the point where you actually need to start specializing at this point, rather than being a flex player. Like, you need to pick a role and a couple of heroes, pretty much. And, you know, you'll like, still have to flex occasionally, just based off of, like, the teammates you get in the game, but, like, by the time you get, like, above Diamond, I think flexing is not really feasible, and at that point you need to be much more narrowed down in your the heroes you play as. I've always been an advocate of having a narrow hero pool, being, like, versatile enough that you can fill if you have to, but still just, like, focusing on a couple of heroes. I've always been of that mindset, but it definitely gets harder the higher you climb. So, next up is how to manage a choke point as Reinhardt. And this post was mostly talking about how they're standing in the choke point holding their shield up, which is a rare sight these days for a Reinhardt player, to be honest with you. But they were doing that, and then if, like, they get, if, like, Moira starts using Coalescence, Lucio uses Speed Boost, something like that to try and, like, engage a fight, they, like, go in to start swinging, and then their DPS get killed behind them. And they're like, well, what do you do about that? Do you just kind of, like, ignore the supports doing that, even if they're yelling at you, and go and start swinging? Or do you, I've fucked up the train of that sentence. Do you go and swing and just, like, do what the supports want you to, or do you ignore them even if they're yelling at you? And it's a little bit more complicated than that. When you're, like, going in and swinging as Reinhardt, I do think you should avoid just holding left click as much as possible. I think you should still be looking to get use out of your shield the entire time, so doing a lot of, like, flicking your shield up just to, like, between swings, just to block some damage coming through, and it'll mitigate damage on you, if nothing else. You'll do slightly less damage than if you just held down left-click the whole time, but I mean, that's never been a big issue for me. I've always been willing to give up DPS on Reinhardt in exchange for protecting my teammates, because Reinhardt's a fucking tank, dude. The whole point is meant to be blocking damage for your teammates and doing damage where possible, whereas most Reinhardt players approach it from the angle of they're looking to get to doing damage as soon as possible so they can stop blocking damage for their team. I think most Reinhardt players have their priorities backwards. And I do mean most Reinhardt players. So, I'm not really all that bothered about just ignoring it. It'll depend on, like, what I'm looking at more than anything else on the enemy team. Because if I'm looking at, like, long-range hit-scan DPS over there, and then I'm not really gonna do much swinging unless, like, I'm pretty much in a fight and, like, I gotta kind of try and assert myself somewhat right now. If it's a more, like, brawly team, like there's a Genji in there, like they're running more of like a dive-ish comp where they've got like a Genji and a hit scan DPS, then like I'm more inclined to take my shield down and start swinging, just because there's lower possibility of my teammates getting bursted to death behind me when I take my shield down. But I got no problem just holding my shield up. But if you mostly look at the enemy team and think to yourself, well, how scary are they? How much, like, meaningful damage am I really going to be blocking if I stand here? Don't just kind of, like, approach it as, like, it's a set option, like, if the support is using Coalescent Speed Boost, do I start swinging or not? Like, you gotta look at the enemy team and base it off of that, because your main goal is keeping your teammates alive, and that'll mean that sometimes you don't get to really participate in the team fight. Sometimes you have to stand there and hold your shield up so your DPS get to fight uncontested. But once a brawl starts, like, it starts getting more into, like, a skirmish, like, or outright brawl, at that point, like, go and start swinging at them a little bit more, especially if they're trying to, like, the other Reinhardt's just, like, running up to you and start swinging at you. Then, like, don't be afraid to hit him back. Don't take it like a total bitch, but try and, like, flick your shield up as much as you can during the fight anyway, just to mitigate as much damage as you can while putting your own damage in as well. So there you go. The answer is it's complicated. Next up was, how does one not die when playing Zarya? And this one didn't exactly come with a lot of context. It was pretty much like a one-sentence descriptor, but like, what I think most, the thing the post did talk about was saying that Zarya's shields are very weak and don't stay around for very long, so how exactly are they a tank? And the way I interpreted that specific stance on her shields is, this person is probably standing out in the middle of open space expecting the bubble to get you out of trouble if you can. But, like, no tank actually does that. No tank actually just, like, stands out in open space holding their shield up, because no tank has an infinite health shield. So you always, even if you're playing a tank, continue playing around cover, because you are invariably going to need to use cover at some point, even if just to let your shield recharge, right? But sometimes things get scary, you need to get behind cover. So all tanks play around cover, and like Zarya, you play around cover still. You also play around, like, your shield, your main tank as well, like you stand behind his shield, but you also want to be playing around cover at the same time, or playing near cover. So that's what I assumed was probably happening, not playing around cover enough, but simultaneously, an issue that Zarya players usually have is thinking they can do whatever the fuck they want because they are high energy, which is not entirely unfounded, but you also need to be aware of how aggressive you're being, because just because you're high energy doesn't mean you are invulnerable. You are going to do a lot of damage. High energy Zarya is the best hero in the game. But you're not allowed to just, like, run into 6 people and start pushing right-click, right? Like, you've gotta go through some steps still. So you play around cover, and you build up your energy, and you, like, poke and prod at them. And then, like, when a team fight actually engages, that's when you commit, and you start, like, really trying to fuck people with your high energy. You can't just, like, run into them like, well, I'm high energy now, so I can do whatever the fuck. You do want to play more aggressive while you're high energy, because you're gonna do a fucking lot of damage. Like, you chew through anybody that you get your hands on. But you do also need to be aware that, like, they can still burst you to death. Zarya's only got 400 health, and not a super high durability shield, so you've still got to be careful. But just based off the post, I was like, this person's probably just kind of like standing out in open space, not really playing around cover enough, because they're like, well, I'm a tank. That means I can stand out, like, right here, right? I'm a tank. I don't need to worry about cover. No, you do need to worry about cover as a tank still, unfortunately. As much as we wish we didn't, we do still have to play around cover, sadly. So there you go. Next up was, how big are these McCree and Diva changes? And I think the McCree thing is being drastically overblown based on PTR results right now, because a lot of people are saying that Reaper is mad overpowered, or McCree rather is mad overpowered. Reaper. The thing is that, like, basically the change to McCree's, like, left click only matters in regards to killing barriers and tanks, so my concern would be that McCree becomes the best hero in the game at killing tanks again. Because you don't fire as fast as you possibly can on McCree most of the time right now. Because squishy heroes are small and hard to hit, and if you just, like, hold down left click on McCree, you're gonna be way less accurate than if you just tapped it. And if you're tapping it, you're not firing at max speed regardless, so for a lot of the game, the McCree change will not make that much difference. It will make a difference for breaking barriers and for killing tanks, so that would be my main concern, is that he'll turn up and just start shredding tanks. But he can already kind of do that with his right click, so at the same time, I'm not, like, super concerned about it. People are saying he's very overpowered based off the PTR, but, like, basing anything off of the PTR is, like, really foolish, because the PTR is not the majority of the player base. Like, it tends to be the streamers and the pro players that are doing stuff on the PTR, and those people are usually a lot better than your average player. So I think that it will not make that much difference, but he might end up, like, really chewing through tanks or barriers with a slight increase, because it is a 25% increase in DPS from McCree now, if you're firing as fast as you possibly can, which is only really going to happen versus tanks and shields. So I foresee it being more blown out of proportion by the player base based off of these initial results than it will be in actual practice. But at the same time, he could end up being mad overpowered just for his sheer ability to chew through tanks. So we'll see, but I suspect it will not be as bad as people are saying it is. The Diva one, like, it'll make the Diva player sad. The biggest thing about the Diva change, to be honest with you, is they've actually changed the particle effect on Defense Matrix. It is way clearer now where its area is. Like, it is extremely cleaner and more readable as an ability goes. So I think that's actually the big change for Diva, more than the actual reduction itself. Like, yeah, 5 meters, it got reduced by 33%, like, that's a lot, but, like, it's still a strong ability. Like, if it's been able to survive having its duration cut all the way down to 1 second, like, I don't think a reduction in range is going to make that much difference, because a lot of the time, the Diva isn't really eating important projectiles from very far away. Like, I think about the use case I see for Defense Matrix, and a lot of the time it's Diva blocking shit flying at her teammate. It's not, or, like, covering her while she's going in. There isn't a lot of, like, snatching things from a million miles away. The only thing I'll think it will really affect that much is, like, it'll make it harder for her to save someone if they get hooked by Roadhog, because that's the case where she would need to reach really far with Defense Matrix to get use out of it. Most of the other time, I don't think it will really make that much difference to Diva. It will make a difference now and then. She'll be, like, slightly out of range of something where she wouldn't have been previously, but the majority use case for Diva, I don't think it will actually make that much difference. It's just one of those things where it's like, it looks like it'll be really bad, but like, I think it'll make Diva players sad now and then, but overall it'll be fairly imperceptible. But the particle effect change will be the big thing, because there'll be less people. Like, I think the particle change is a bigger nerf overall, because Defense Matrix's hitbox is, like, really indistinct with the current particle effect. So, it tends to lead to people chucking shit where they think it'll work, but it actually still ends up getting snatched by Defense Matrix regardless. Whereas now the particle effect is extremely clean and easy to read, so I think there'll be people will be less greedy when playing against Diva, pretty much. I think that'll be a bigger effect than the actual range reduction will be. So, overall, I think overblown, but we'll see with McCree. He might end up being strong just because of his ability to kill tanks, but it will not be an overall DPS increase for him on anybody other than tanks. So we have to see like how good he is at killing a tank in practice, pretty much. So there you go. Next up is, why is Orisa/Roadhog considered OP now? And the simple answer is pretty much Batista's in the game, and Batista makes bunker comps way stronger. Other heroes that are like, or other team comps that are not dive comp, or that are not what the fuck is wrong with me? Other comps that are not bunker comps have had various aspects of them nerfed over time, like dive comps are less effective than they used to be, long-range heroes, Pharah's gotten less effective as time's gotten by, just as people get better at playing the game, and like slowly more Pharah counters have been added to the game. Like people like Lucio getting nerfed has reduced the effectiveness of dive comps. So stuff like that has affected other compositions out there, but like Bridget also has like being in the game has drastically reduced the effectiveness of dive comps. So things like that have played a factor into it, but I think it's mostly Batista bolstering the strength of bunker comps exceptionally. There's also the aspect that bunker comps are just very easy to play, and they tend to be very punishing for people that don't know what to do versus the comps, and people that are just not very good at working together, which tends to be the case in the majority of the competitive ladder until very high SR. So you've got, like, the only requirement on your team to execute a bunker comp well is your teammates have to stand close to each other. And that's pretty much it. Like, you don't really require a lot of teamwork to do a bunker comp other than that. So they're very easy to execute. No bunker comp hero is really hard to play. They're all very simple heroes to play. May's also much better now, so May is, also makes bunker comps, stronger just because it makes it much more obnoxious to try and, kill the bunker around the May, because, yeah, you get into the bunker and now you're gonna get frozen and bullied by May, so that also affects it a little bit, but I think it's mostly just Batista and the fact that bunker comps are very easy to play, which makes, and very hard to play against. Like, it's very often I'll come over to the Overwatch subreddit and we'll see a bunch of people, like, asking how you beat bunker comps, right? Usually the Bastion variant, which is the one that is most bolstered by Batista's presence, but I think that's the majority reason. If you listen to the subreddit, then Orisa Roadhog has been overpowered for, I think, about 7 years at this point, so, you know, I haven't always agreed with that. I don't think they're really that OP now. I think, I don't think that particular tank combo is OP. I think it is more just that Batista is really strong. Oh man, we're going way too aggro right now with like 35 health. Did you see how far in we ran right there? Oh my goodness. Yeah, so Batista is the main reason, but also just ease of access, and the other comps have gotten less effective as time has gone by. So there you go. I think those are the main reasons. Next up is it viable to use jump plus shield bash as an escape for Bridget? And yeah, it is. It kind of depends on the situation you're in. The post in particular was talking about, like, if I fucked up pretty much, I'm in, like, a bad spot now. Is it possible for me to use this to get out? Or is it better to, like, shield bash someone to stun them and then, like, proc inspire and get away? And if you're in a spot where, like, you've overextended and you're now in a bad place, like, getting Inspire procced will not oftentimes save you, to be honest, if you're, like, really fucked up. Yeah, I'll use the shield bash and jump to get away. It depends on what's happening at the time. Because if you're only getting, like, attacked by one guy, I think you're gonna be better off just trying to brawl it out with the guy rather than run away from them. Especially if it's like, there are some people that seem really scary to fight as Bridget, but you just need to be kind of patient with how you fight them. Like, people think, like, dueling Roadhog or Reaper is really hard as Bridget. It's actually really fucking easy unless the Roadhog or the Reaper are really good. Because you just have to be, like, really patient and be willing to hold your shield up to regenerate. Because, like, they won't actually kill you unless you, like, get right up on them, like, point blank, and take your shield down. As long as you, like, space it out and use your cooldowns, and you're, like, willing to just, like, hold your shield up and let your health regenerate behind it now and then during the fight, like, you'll beat them in a 1v1. You just need to be patient. If somebody comes to help him, it's, like, all over. But you can fight these people. I think Roadhog is one of the easiest people in the game to duel as Bridget, because if he doesn't one-shot you or have health, like, there's no way he ever kills you. If you get past the hook, it's all over. Like, he's gotta just get in your face. So the trick is you don't let him get in your face. You, like, space it out more than that. So if it's only, like, one person, then you can brawl it out. Other than that, like, if you're outnumbered, you're looking to get out as soon as possible. Now, it still might be better to shield bash someone, depending on what's happened, because if you shield bash them, that's also a free push away. So, you can kind of, like, fuck them up, especially if it's someone that needs to be close to you to kill them. Like, if you're getting chased by, like, a Reaper and someone else, you can stun the Reaper, push him away, and then, like, run away, right? You could also just push the person away and then do the jump shield bash to get away. Like, you've got options pretty much depending on what's going to happen, but yeah, it is viable to use jump shield bash as an escape. It is not your ideal circumstance to be in as Bridget, as you might assume, but if you've fucked up for one reason or another and you're in that position, it is feasible to use it as an escape, but the real strat is just try not to be in a position where you have to use shield bash as an escape, because the real, like, benefit of shield bash is the crowd controlling effect of it. So, yes, it is viable to do that based on the situation, though not always. Pretty much, like, if it's an even fight, a lot of the time you'll be better brawling it out with the guy rather than using it to run away. But if you're outnumbered, sometimes you just need to do everything you can to, like, get away, and the jump shield bash will help with that. So there you go. Next up is there any time where Zarya is a bad pick? And pretty much, like, I don't think there's really a bad case for Zarya other than, like, your other tank's an off tank or you've got no other tank. Zarya can't solo tank, and if you've got two off tanks, that's also analogous to having no tank, to be honest with you. So, Zarya needs to be working with a main tank to be viable. Unfortunately, you can't really solo tank a Zarya. And you can't do, like, Road Zarya or, like, Zarya Diva. It just doesn't work that well. Other than that, like, no, people will tell you that it's not viable to pick Zarya with Orisa, but I don't agree with that. I think it's going to be slightly harder for you to build charge with an Orisa than you would with a Reinhardt, but that's just because Orisa players aren't as fucking stupid as Reinhardt players are, right? Like, the reason you're going to build a lot of charge off of a Reinhardt player a lot of the time is you bubble his stupid ass when he ran in and did something stupid, right? Like, that's, like, what usually happens, to be honest with you, but, like, you can pick Zarya with Orisa. Like, people blow that one out of proportion. Like, yeah, you won't get as much energy, but, like, that shouldn't be... Like, if you can't build energy at all because you're working with an Orisa instead of a Reinhardt, then, like, I think you're just not that good at Zarya, dude, to be perfectly honest with you. I think you need to get better at generating energy. But pretty much, like, other than that, no, I don't really think so. If you've got no, like, other ults to combo with Graviton, Zarya's a little bit worse, but, like, Graviton by itself is still a strong effect. You don't necessarily need another ult to combo with it. It's, like, strong by itself, but not having a combo like Barrage or Pulse Bomb, Dragonblade, Dragon Strike, like, Makes it a little bit worse, but like Zarya is still not bad. So pretty much only if you've got no other tank or the other tank's an off tank, I think. Anything else is fine. Next up is, should I always pick the hero that best synergizes with the team, even if I'm not very good with them? No, you shouldn't. There's no point picking a hero that you don't know how to play. Even if it is the best play, synergy-wise or team comp-wise, if you don't know how to play that hero, or you're not very good at that hero, you will not be able to take advantage of the reason that that hero synergizes well with your teammates, or is the best composition-wise. Like, you won't be able to take advantage of it, so there's no point picking it for that reason, because why? You're not going to be able to leverage it. So, you always should pick a hero that you know how to play. Don't pick something just because, it's a counter pick to them. If you don't know how to play him, you won't be able to do the counter pick properly. This synergizes better. He picked Reinhardt, so I should pick Zarya because she synergizes best with Reinhardt. If you don't know how to play Zarya, there's no point because you won't be able to take advantage of that reason. Right? That's the whole thing. So, no, you should always stick to playing heroes that you know how to play. Even if, I'll be honest with you, right? Like, people are, don't fuck the team comp, pick something, try and pick something at least that fits with the team comp. Real fucking talk, if you're like a DPS main and you just don't know how to play any healers or tanks, right? You just don't know how. I think you should try to learn how to play some of those characters so you can fill, but if you don't know how to play any tanks or any healers, don't fucking pick one. You'll be bad at them. To be honest with you, just pick a third DPS, Don't worry about it that much, man. I see bad comps beat good comps all the fucking time. Earlier today, we were streaming, and we played against this team that ran 4 DPS or even 5 DPS, and we lost to that team about 3 times in a row. I see bad comps beat good comps all the time. It's not as big of a deal as people actually think it is. Composition is an important aspect of the game, especially as you climb in ranks, but, for the majority of the player base, if you don't know how to play a hero, don't play the hero. Don't worry about making your team comp a bit worse, because, you picking the thing that would make the team comp better is pointless if you can't take advantage of the reason it's the better pick. So, just pick a third DPS. I don't give a shit, dude. Pick a third healer. Whatever. Pick a third tank, whatever. Just pick the heroes that you know how to play. It is more important you are playing a hero you know how to play than anything else. Don't worry about it that much. Play what you know how to play. Don't sit worrying about the team comp aspect of it too much. I encourage you to try and be able to play at least, a hero in every category. Ideally, you can play 2 from every category to at least a decent level. But, dude, if you can't, you can't. Right? Some people, they only like one hero. I just don't want to play anybody else except Mei. Whatever. Just play Mei. Whatever. It's a fun video game, dude. You do whatever you want to do. I don't care. As long as you're trying to win, I don't care what you do, to be honest with you. So, just pick the heroes you know how to play. That's the moral of the story. And next up, and this is the last question I've got for this week, is when do we actually need a shield tank? And this is one of those things that I see people in-game just kind of parrot as something that they say when they don't really know what to say. Where they'll start losing the game and they'll say, can we get a shield tank? We need a shield tank. And they just kind of say that without really thinking about that word. They just we need a shield tank. We're losing. We don't have a shield tank. We must need a shield tank, right? It's just one of those things they pick at and just pluck out as the reason devoid of context. You need a shield tank when, you have a relatively static team comp, right? So, a bunker comp needs a shield tank, right? They need the Orisa to be there to actually cover them, right? If you want, static DPS that like to abuse sight lines and are relatively, stationary, right? They're actually going to sit down in a position, behind a shield and, shoot at the enemy team from that position, and then you slowly move forward with them, you slowly move back with them, whatever. But the other team also kind of depends on this, because you need to have something that you can realistically be blocking most of the time. So if they're running a full dive comp, you having a shield tank is not actually that impactful, because if they've got Genji, Tracer, Winston, Diva, Lucio, Anna, right? you actually have very little on that team comp you will be blocking most of the time. Like, you could feasibly be blocking Genji, but he's probably flanking your team. You could be blocking Tracer, but he's going to be flanking your team. You can't block Winston. You can be blocking Diva, but she's getting in people's faces, right? She's not sitting, like, poking at you. Like, you can block Anna, you can block Lucio, but, like, you're not really worrying about blocking Anna a lot of the time, and Lucio's just gonna go through you. So, you're not gonna be blocking a lot versus that team comp, so having a shield tank might not be as impactful as just having a Winston to, like, fight off the flankers or something, right? So, those are kind of, like, the two quantifiers, like, how static is my team? Because if my team is very dynamic, they're like, I've got like Pharah, Genji, they are not going to be using my shield that much. So me being a shield tank is less impactful. I'm probably better off leaning into the dive aspect of the team and picking Winston or Hammond at that point, right? If I've got a team comp that's like Soldier McCree, then that's like, I pick Reinhardt for that comp because I want to sit in front of them and like let them abuse their sight lines, give them uncontested lines of sight, stuff like that. But if I've got Soldier McCree and they're running the full dive comp we just talked about, I'm not blocking that much again. So at that point, I'm better off picking Winston so I can try and protect my long range heroes from the flankers instead. Winston will be better at that than Reinhardt will be most of the time. So those are like the two things, like how much damage am I going to be feasibly blocking from the enemy team versus how many of my teammates actually want to stay behind my shield. Because if they're just going to be going off doing their own thing, I don't need to be a shield. I don't have to. Sometimes you might still want to be a shield tank because you can just like stand on the objective. Like Reinhardt standing on the objective is better than Winston standing on the objective, right? So sometimes you'll want to do it even if your team comp isn't really that static, just for the sheer, like, standing on the point potential Reinhardt has, but I think that's a relatively minor edge case overall, so that's what you want to think about. And, like, you can't really react to their team comp before you see it, right? So you'll need to, like, feel that one out, but, like, coming out of spawn, just look at your teammates and think, how many of them can feasibly be standing behind my shield, or will be feasibly standing behind my shield? Genji, Tracer, they'll never be here. I don't really need to be a Reinhardt. I don't really need to be an Orisa. Soldier McCree, now they are going to be sitting behind my shield. I'm going to be blocking damage for them, so this is where I'll pick the Reinhardt or Orisa. And then when I see the enemy team, if I see a full dive comp, at that point I'm thinking, well, I see Genji, Tracer, what am I blocking at that point, right? Probably not a whole lot. I'll be better off changing to Winston. If I see, like, Widow, Soldier, Ashe, McCree, something like that, or, like, Hanzo, Soldier, you know, the long-range heroes, pretty much, the mid-long-range heroes, then, like, okay, now we got some meaningful damage that I can be blocking, so now we're talking. If it's, like, 50-50, if they've got, like, Genji and also Soldier, or like Genji and Ashe, Tracer and Ashe, Pharah and McCree, something like that, then you've still got something that you're feasibly blocking, right? Like you might not be blocking the Tracer or the Genji that frequently, it's still possible, but not that frequently, but you will still be blocking damage from their other DPS a lot, and those are the ones that you're mostly worrying about as a tank player. Like, you're not often worrying about blocking like the Diva or the Winston, right? Like, most of the what am I blocking my teammates from is the DPS. So those are the things that I look at more than like their tanks or their healers. I look at their DPS and go, what am I blocking? So there you go. The we need a shield tank is one of those things where I think people just say it without really thinking about it. It's one of those things where people go like, we need 222, but they don't care what the 222 is, right? They're likely to push tab, see Reinhardt Zarya or Roadhog Zarya, and go, hey, that's 222. We got two tanks. Yeah, the two tanks are Roadhog Zarya. Yeah, but it's 222, right? We got two tanks. And that's all, right? Like, they don't worry about, like, the deeper level of it. They just know the really baseline part of it. Like, well, we're losing. Why are we losing? We've got 222. But we don't have a shield tank. That must be the problem. And then they just, like, say that. So, you know, whatever. But there you go. So that's all I got for you this week. So thank you very much for watching. If you did, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer. If you haven't already, you can join our Discord and ask questions more directly and have a conversation about them, or just shitpost with us. I've started streaming on Twitch Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 7 p.m. EST to 11 EST. There's a link to the channel in the description. And if you managed to make it all this way through the video and somehow still enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more content of middling quality in the future. And I hope you found the video helpful.